Welcome to the Crit House myFIVE series. Today's guest is Bob Korn, a master printer whose work has helped shape the way we see some of the most iconic photographs of our time. From his studio on Cape Cod, Bob has spent nearly 50 years collaborating with legendary photographers including Richard Avedon, Joel Meyerowitz, David Burnett, Marc Hauser, and Carol Guzzi. His prints live in the collections of the Getty, the Museum of Modern Art, the Smithsonian, and museums around the world. But for Bob, printing has always been about something deeper than technique. Working through photography's transition from darkroom to digital, he has remained devoted to the physical print, to light, tone, emotion, and the experience of holding an image in your hands. As Bob says, a photograph is not a photograph until it's a print. In this episode, Bob Korn shares 5 unforgettable images and the stories behind bringing them to life.
So one of the things that I was excited to talk to you about is this idea that the photographer sees one thing and has an idea for one thing, but that's the capturing of the image. And photographers aren't necessarily, just because you're a photographer doesn't necessarily mean you're a printer, because they're different skill sets. They're related without question, but you are bringing a skill set to a photographer that they may not necessarily have. Like I'm basically a black and white person, which I apologize for, but
Well, that's okay. I print black and white too.
okay, all right.
I do it all.
But I don't print because I know I don't have that skill set to envision what a print should be. So if I have a show, I'm not printing here, and it's partly because I want to trust an expert like yourself to be able to create for me what the best image that I can on the wall. But talk about that.
Well, that's the whole key. Is we've talked about earlier, and the saying that I have is a photograph isn't a photograph until it's a print. We talk about a negative, we talk about a transparency, we talk about a file. I take that and then I put it on the paper to create the photograph. I love the fact where you understand that, well, I really don't have the skill set to take that next step. A lot of people, unfortunately, during this digital revolution, they were told, buy this printer, buy this computer, buy this software, push the button. And they became a printer.
Printers, yeah.
I asked a customer who did that. I said, so what pill did you take last night to wake up and be a master printer, to be able to do what I've been doing for 30 odd years? And they go, well, I bought the equipment. And I tell a story.
Which is the same thing as you saying you're a photographer because you bought a nice camera, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I had a gentleman come in one time and was peppering me with questions about the whole thing. I said, well, this is my livelihood. You can hire me. I teach, I still teach. And
Right.
he goes, and he's going on and asking. And I said, so what do you do? And he said, I'm a surgeon. And I said, great. I have a scalpel laid down. And if his head could have exploded, it would have. He was so offended. And I said, it's the same thing. Just because you have the tool doesn't mean you know how to use it.
Yeah.
I've been very fortunate that over all this time, being in the traditional wet darkroom, then doing dye transfer, I was able to make this transition because all it is it's just a new tool. That's all it is. It's the same principle. It's the same concept of light. We're reproducing light. We're reproducing reality. It's just using a different tool. So having that foundation for me that I've developed all these years is what I believe separates me from others. Working with me is a collaboration. I'm educating you on this process, how it's going to work the best to be able to give you then the best representation of your vision, because it's still your vision, but I'm bringing that second part of it to you. So when they come to me, I'm able to present to them and work with them to educate them and show them that, again, going back to the definition of photography, light exposing a light sensitive material. Light is the key word, is that I understand light. I know how to look at light and what light does on highly reflective white buildings, and underneath a tree, how light balances, for contrast with black and white, for color, and color quality. And so I strive to make a print that puts up no barrier between you and the image, the viewer and the image. It's like, for instance, the Joel Meyerowitz image. Well, this image is, one that was from either a Cape Light or a Summer's Day, the second book. And it's about, these people are standing low tide in the bay. So you're having the reflections of the sky and the water, the texture of the water, being able to see into the water. And then the big thing is seeing where the light is coming from and understanding then the time of day and the quality of that light. You can tell it's low and coming across. It's not high and coming down. It's low and across. So that's going to have a different look and a different feel. So that's the thing that I really strive for with this picture of Joel's. And again, it's understanding the color of the light. Yes.
Joel came to you with this negative, which
Yes.
I assume is an 8 by 10.
Yes. 8 by 10
Yeah.
negative.
How did this image vary from his understanding of it to your understanding of it?
One of the things is because with his work, I live here. I
Right.
live this light and see it. But then also the one thing with Joel is one of the things, he taught me, he helped teach me how to see and just look at light and understand it. And also he wrote really detailed notes. He would give me these cards that had a description of the quality of light, the contrast, the color at the horizon, and then as it went up. So that helped as just that guide. And then I would interpret his notes. And as we progressed, in our working relationship, it was like, you got it, you got it. Or it was like, well, I want a little more magenta overall because it felt warmer to me. So I would do that. Or he goes, I want it a little softer in terms of, exposure, contrast. And back in those days, in the analog days, that was a very difficult thing, contrast to adjust. So learning, understanding how in any kind of photography, you have three components. You have exposure, color, and contrast. And each one of those affects the other two together in a sense.
Yeah.
So like
Right.
if you're going to make a print lighter, it's going to affect the contrast and the overall light and dark and the color. So you have to be aware of that. And then you start to understand, well, if you wanted softer light to get that in a dark room was to make the whole thing overall lighter. But then, okay, going back and understanding where you have to then burn things back in, or if you do it the opposite, you expose for this one area, then you make the other area lighter. So all these tools and things that you had to learn in the traditional darkroom were very, very helpful for me to move to the digital darkroom. There are 10 different ways to do the same thing in digital software.
Right. Right.
And it's like, well, when you were in a dark room, you had an f-stop, you had a timer, and you had your color filters. Or if it was black and white, you had your contrast papers or your poly contrast filters. And that's all it is. That's all it is. It's not all these different, clipping of highlights and histograms and then hues versus gammas versus whatever. you
Yeah.
know, Half the stuff that's in there, I don't even know. I have students that know so much more about the technology than I do, but I know what I need to know to make it work and produce, these prints. Uh,
Let's talk about another one of your prints. You had referenced Richard Avedon and the image of the pants and the shoes.
yeah, those are actually Andy Warhol's feet.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, this was an image that the Avedon studio reached out to me, which was an unbelievable thrill. You know, Richard Avedon's calling me Bob Korn, this guy that has a little lab on Cape Cod. It's Richard Avedon.
Yeah.
And it really, today still, it's one of the highlights if you talk about my career. And so they sent me this 8 by 10 transparency that they wanted reproduced. I made an inner negative because that's what we did back then. And then this is the return to me. I made him this proof. The print was going to be 20 by 24. So I sent him an 8 by 10 proof with my first rendition of this image, looking at its transparency, again, thinking about light and color. And so I sent this off to him. And about a week later, it comes back with this acetate taped over it with his corrections that he wanted to see done. One was, making the borders, the black, the same width. Instead of, at that point, there was a hint of green in those black borders. So to take that out, the little bit of green, to try and pop the red in the socks. And so those are his notes. I looked at his notes, made the correction, sent the print back. They loved it, and I got a check. It was great.
Well, let's talk about Carol and you, and
Sure.
discuss this beautiful, moving, looks to be tragic image from Carol Guzzi. Tell us about this image and the print process and that going from beginning to end with this print.
Sure. Well, Carol, and I hope most of you know, Carol is the only 4-time Pulitzer Prize winner in any discipline. The woman is just remarkable.
I
And
have heard to her being referred to as the greatest living photographer by some very great photographers.
I would not dispute that, for her work, the emotion and the sensitivity that she captures in these situations where she's being shot at. There are bombs going off. This is a piece from a project from Mosul, Iraq. And again, with Carol, it was the same sort of thing. She sent me a bunch of her files. This was for a show that I did of hers in my little gallery space. And we, she said, this is one of the pieces. She sent me, we had 30 pieces. She sent me about 50 or so. And then I curated it down, and with her help. And this one of just this little girl who is just, you feel
Oh,
the fear and terror from her being, taken to hopefully safety. And again, it's one of these things when you are standing in front of this print, you feel like you're running along with her. And that's the goals that I bring to this work. And again, for Carol, it was something that she, we had a mutual friend down here. And so the friend reached out to her, told me about me. She sent me originally just one file to test and of a different image, and she was really pleased most of the time. And it's not that I'm patting myself on the back, but most people who have been working with others or even print their own work, when they see my work, they're going, wow, I've never seen it look like this,
mm.
because there's an emotion. The image is full of emotion. You want the reproduction of it to be the same. And that's what I bring in. So with all my customers who don't live here directly, or even the ones that do, we always proof, especially if I'm making a larger print and show prints. It's like, okay, here I am. This is my interpretation, so you can see. And again, once in a while, they'll go, okay, can it be a little darker or can it be this? And I do that, and then we're good to go. I have customers, another one that we'll talk about, David Burnett. He goes, Bob, just print it. I don't need to see anything. Carol is kind of the same way because she was unfortunately not able to come see the show. And so I went to see her. She lives outside of DC in Virginia. My daughter lives in DC. So we visited her and I took the prints to Carol, and you could just see the emotion in her face that just for me, that's what I strive for. And she goes, I've never seen my work look like this. And again, I feel very fortunate. I hear that from a lot of people that I work with. They know what I do, and there's this trust that we develop because, again, it's their baby. You send me
Yep.
a print, even though you say you did do black and white, I'll make you black and white print. And it's that same kind of thing because what people see on the wall is mine. What people
Right.
buy is mine. And I put a little emboss on my print. And people have told me, and I know this, it helps bring a different sort of level to their work. Some might say, credibility, but value. I've had people say that they say, oh, this work was printed by Bob Korn, and it does, after all these years, gives it that value. So
Right.
it's really exciting,
Well,
for me.
you mentioned David Burnett. You mentioned black and white.
Yeah,
So let's take a look at this image of the pole vaulter from David Burnett. Talk about this. Is this a one and done? Just print it, and he said okay. Like you said, he doesn't ask
pretty
for.
much. Pretty much, which is what's really nice when people understand what I do, that this guy prints. This is, what he's been doing. He's a printmaker. And so again, with this was from actually a 4x5 original. And this is from the Penn Relays, the track and field. And so again, with this and with black and white, the idea of representing that light, that hard light that is highlighted right on the athlete, how it's highlighting and in the pit, and then how this against this more than likely beautiful deep blue sky. Well, how do you get that tone? And the one thing, if you notice, when you look at these prints, or even if you think yourself when you look at a print, the sky isn't deep blue at the horizon. It's
Right.
not till you look up and it's like, oh, there's the color.
Right.
So understanding that subtlety of how that light works in the horizon. So if you look here, right above the stadium, has this little bit of glow, this little bit of soft light that then goes up. So again, it's this idea of looking and understanding the light. This was midday and really hot, bright light. So still with black and white, it's the contrast, understanding that level and that point. And one thing that I talk about with contrast and with digital is that if the sun is on something white, solid bright white, there's not going to be any detail.
Right.
It's just not there. So understanding that spot where you go between information and tone. And when you see these actual prints, then you see those real kind of subtleties that separate what I do and then again brings this work to life.
So we're going to continue with the black and white image from Marc Hauser, and this gets us into some of those gray tones.
Well, this is Marc Hauser's work, and I don't know how many people again know who Marc Hauser is, but Marc, during the 80s and 90s, the heydays of commercial advertising photographer, he was the portrait guy. One of the stories that, Marc told me is IBM reached out to Irving Penn to photograph a series for them, campaign. And he said, no, called Marc, and it was based off of Penn's famous picture of the mudmen, people all covered in mud
Yep.
and the masks. Marc has this just incredible ability to, just like Joel, in a sense, was able to capture light. Marc is able to capture the essence of people. I currently have the show up of Marc's work. Here is portraits, and this one here, they're twins. They're sisters. Just the softness and the beauty. Talk about the difference in the black and white. In a sense, the harshness of the tone of David's because of the type of light, and then the softness in this one of Marc's, not only because, again, of how it was lit and the softness of it, but then the softness of who they are, that, in a sense, the essence of these two sisters. And that's really, really important. I've talked about when I've taught, and I had this woman who was doing a project, a study of her daughter over like a 5-6 year period, and was working with her. And I said to her, showed me a print, and I said, "So is your daughter a mean girl?" She goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "Is she a mean girl?" She goes, "No, she's incredibly sweet. She's caring." And I said, "Well, look at this print of her that you made. Now go do these things." And she brought it back. I said, "Which one is her?" And she said, "Oh my gosh, her print was too contrasty. It was
Too
black and white.
contrast. Yeah. Right.
Too,
Right.
yeah, it was too
Yeah.
contrasty. So there was this harshness to it.
Yeah.
And you see the print represents everything.
Yep.
That's what you're seeing. That's the final piece. And so it was like, she goes, "I never would have thought that. I never would have seen this."
Well, Bob, this is what a great conversation. Really enjoyable. We
Oh,
started
me,
off by
I'm
saying,
really enjoying it.
so we started off saying, I started off saying you are a photographer as well. You're known as a printer, but I mean, you are yourself a photographer, and you sent across a couple of images. Maybe you tell me, of all of the things you have done as a printer, how has that affected you as a photographer when you walk with your camera out in the world? How has that changed the way that you see and how you capture images?
Well, I think what it's done, and nobody's ever asked me that, but I like that question. And when I think about it, my work is about, I think of it as seeing that other people don't see. It's just stuff out there that everybody's normally is just going to walk by and not even
Mhm.
notice. I work with, again, color, a lot of color, how the light changes these colors within there, understanding, representing that. But generally, it's pretty graphic, and it's about shape and then light. And so I think that comes back to, with photographs, it's the frame. You're working within a frame. And so I'm looking at that all day long, work an image within a frame, and then working with people to help them understand that, negative space can be really good,
Yeah.
and understanding how to work within a frame. So I think just doing that over and over and over again, I think has influenced my work in terms of, working within this frame. And one of the things that, when you say, and I've never thought of myself as a photographer, but a dear friend, an amazing photographer, Kerry Walensky, was very, very close with. He was, a geographic photographer. And one day he was doing portfolio reviews up in Boston for the PRC, the
Hmm.
Photographic Resource Center. And he goes, "Bob, I want you to come with me." I said, "Why?" He goes, "I want you to come with me and explain to people what they're presenting to me to see in terms of the print." And so I said, "Sure, but I'm not going to talk about the visual. That's you." He goes, "No, Bob, you're a photographer." I said, "No, I'm not." He goes, "You're a photographer. You need to understand that, yes, you are a photographer. You may consider yourself a printmaker, and people know you as a printmaker, but you're a photographer." I've done a couple shows of my own work. My first one I did during COVID, so nobody could come and see it. With my thought process behind it. And I went through work. And the thing that was really interesting, and a friend of mine, Neil Rantoul, I don't know if you know
I
Neil
am
from
very good
Boston.
friends with Neil. He lives in the next
Okay.
town over. Yeah.
No,
He's a great,
really. Yeah.
great
I've
man.
known Neil. Yeah. Neil and I taught together at NISOP.
Oh, okay,
I've
sure.
known
Yeah.
Neil that
Right. Yeah.
long.
Neil has been on the
And
program
so,
several times.
oh, great. Well, Neil, I called up Neil. I said, Neil, will you help curate this for me? Because again, we are our own worst editors. And he said,
Yes.
sure. And so I went through all this stuff, and there were pieces that he picked out that I shot in the 70s, to stuff that was shot 2024, whatever it was. And it's pretty much the same. It's just more refined. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. I work within a box
Yeah. So
ideas,
I
which
have I have one last question to ask for you.
yeah,
Who who do you as a um one of the great printers of our time, who do you look
thank
at
you.
as a printer and think I mean, who are the printers that you admire? They don't, and not necessarily people who are around now, but historically, because and those could be photographers or those could be people that I don't even know about, because I don't know who Cartier-Bresson's printer was. I know he didn't print his own, but like, who are the
Right.
printers who influenced you?
Well, this may sound really stupid and ignorant. I don't know. I'm
Okay.
one of these guys that, like, people talk to me and they drop names about photographers, and I just kind of nod and go, yeah, okay. I've never been a historian of photography. I just look and see what I really like. People have looked at my work and they go, oh, it looks like Stephen Shore and William Eggleston were big influences of yours. Well, I did some prints for each of them, but it never really connected. And for me, I don't know. I just walk in and I go, wow, that's a beautiful print. And
Yeah.
again, it might be, there was a pen exhibition in New York. Some of the prints were stunning. Others were
Yeah.
like, seriously? But again, Penn didn't print these. You know, I didn't know the printer's name is never there. It's just like when we were in California visiting our son, and we went to the Getty, and they had a show of photography, like some of the 50 best images or whatever from their collection. And I walk in, and there's my print of an image I printed for Jim Dow.
Wow.
And Jim Dow, nothing about me. So whoever looks at this has no idea who printed it.
Could
And
you see your emboss still there? Was that
I
visible?
didn't have one back then.
Oh,
I was still a little too like, nah, you don't do that. And so that's the sort of thing that at one point in time, Joel said to me, he goes, if you were in Europe doing what you do, you'd be more famous than me. Because in Europe back in the day, and I think even now, the print or the atelier is highly respected, highly respected. We're
yeah.
here, I still get people going, you're going to charge me $100 for a print? Do you know how much it's going to cost me to get it framed? And it's like, seriously, they've always thought, and especially with digital, I buy the equipment, I can do this.
Yeah.
And,
Well,
uh,
then
you
go
know,
to go to CVS.
yeah, yeah, no,
Yeah.
I have had people, and I go, if you don't want to work with me, if you want this exactly, seriously, go to Staples, go to CVS.
Right.
But if you're interested in, here's my little shameless self promotion. If you watch this, and hopefully you will, and if you find any of the stuff that intriguing to you, even if you do print your own stuff, I have no issues teaching you how to refine it and doing it better. If you have a body of work that you need help just editing, one thing, Jeff, you had mentioned, how Edward hooked us up, Edward Bosch's, and I did a show of his work.
Yeah.
And he came in and he goes, I would have never, ever thought about hanging this work the way you did. I never saw it that way, but now seeing it, it's like, wow, that's different, but it's also really, really good. And it presents it in a whole different way. It's like a whole new body of work.
Yeah.
So I love to share because I always feel that with printing, yeah, you may be really good, but you're not better than I am. I can teach you what I do and, but I'll still do it better. But I'm
But if you
always
want
there.
to, yeah,
Yeah, I'm always there to help. I'd
yeah,
rather
right.
have somebody be able to show something that they're proud of and then can really see it if they can't have me do it all for them.
Well, again, that's why I mean, I'll do work prints off my little brother, whatever it is, printer over here,
Yeah.
just so I could see him. But when it comes to a show, I have to have somebody at your like you to actually make it
Well,
sing. So,
I
Bob
look
Korn has
forward to
been
printing your next show.
well, that will make that happen. Bob Korn, just a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for coming on to the Crit House.
Oh, Jeff, thank you so very much. And I really appreciate you taking the time to acknowledge what I do and what I can bring and what I do bring to this process and the importance of the print for people. So I'm really very, very grateful. And this was great. Can't wait
Well,
to do it
it's
again.
I think it is an element of photography that is not talked about enough is that the criticality of your expertise. So,
Well, thank you so very much.
and thank you all for watching the Crit House.